There is one question this investigation has been orbiting for weeks without ever landing on it directly. Not the masked figure at the front door. Not the ransom notes. Not the damaged utility box. Not even the backpack that every network has covered. The question nobody has driven straight into is the one the evidence is screaming about. The car. Was the same vehicle used to move Nancy Guthrie on the night she vanished the same one that appeared on a back road 8 minutes after her pacemaker went dark? And does that car lead back to the two men whose names have sat at the center of this case since the very beginning? Tomaso Chioni and Dominic Evans? Because here is what most people following this story have not yet connected. As of March 11th, 2026, a vehicle directly linked to Tomaso Chioni, the last confirmed person to see Nancy Guthrie alive, is still sitting in a mechanic shop under the control of the Pima County Sheriff's Department. Not released, not cleared, still being forensically processed. 6 weeks into one of the most intensively resourced federal investigations in recent American history, and no one has explained why that car has not come home. That is where this story begins. That is the thread we are pulling. Welcome back to Cold Case History. I am going to walk you through every detail of this case, the footage, the forensics, the suspect behavior, the DNA, and the digital evidence trail. If you are new here, subscribe now and hit the notification bell. We cover every update on cases like this one the moment they break. And trust me, this one is not finished breaking yet. Let's begin at the beginning. On the evening of Saturday, January 31st, 2026, 84-year-old Nancy Guthrie, mother of Today Show anchor Savannah Guthrie, had dinner at the Tucson home of her daughter Annie. She had arrived by Uber earlier that day. After the meal, her son-in-law Tomaso Chioni drove her home in his vehicle. The trip took roughly 10 minutes. Chioni walked her to the front door, confirmed she was inside, and left. That moment, Nancy stepping through her own front door, was the last time anyone confirmed seeing her. What unfolded in the hours that followed is now the subject of a federal investigation with a scope and intensity rarely seen in a domestic kidnapping case. At 1:47 in the morning on Sunday, February 1st, Nancy's Nest doorbell camera went offline. At 2:12 a.m., images recovered by the FBI from residual back-end server data showed a masked individual in long sleeves, gloves, and a black Ozark Trail backpack standing at Nancy's front door. The figure removed the camera from its mount and positioned plants in front of it to block the line of sight. At 2:28 a.m., Nancy's pacemaker stopped syncing with her iPhone. Pima County Sheriff Chris Nanos confirmed this was the moment investigators believe she was separated from her device. Not a technical failure. A deliberate separation. 8 minutes later, at 2:36 a.m., a vehicle appeared on a Ring camera mounted outside the home of Elias and Danielle Strategulis, 2.5 miles from Nancy's address on Camino Royale, a back road cutting through the Catalina foothills. NBC News drove the route between the two locations and confirmed it takes 6 minutes using roads that bypass every major intersection. Roads that cut directly through the same geographic corridor where Tomaso Chioni lives and works. Roads he would know by instinct after nearly 20 years in this part of Tucson. Run those numbers slowly. 2:28 a.m., the pacemaker signal drops. 6 minutes of travel time along a route that avoids every lit intersection and traffic camera. The vehicle appears at 2:36. A 2-minute gap that investigators themselves have confirmed is consistent with the travel time between those two locations. Not a theory someone assembled online. An official confirmation from the people running the investigation. Now here is the detail that sharpens everything into a single, focused question. The FBI established a 2-mile search perimeter around Nancy's home in the days following her disappearance. The Strategulis camera, the one that captured the vehicle at 2:36, sits at 2.5 miles. Half a mile outside the entire canvas. No investigator knocked on their door. No law enforcement officer flagged their street-facing Ring camera as sitting on the most logical exit route from the scene. Elias and Danielle Strategulis came forward on their own, voluntarily, after watching news coverage and recognizing that Camino Royale was the road being discussed. They contacted Fox News Digital directly. Only after they reached out did that footage enter the public record. Only then did that vehicle become something investigators could work with. Think about what that gap nearly cost this investigation. Ring cameras operate on rolling retention cycles. Footage can be automatically overwritten within 30 to 60 days. If the Strategulis family had waited, if they had assumed someone else had already handled it, that 2:36 a.m. capture might have been permanently erased before any investigator ever requested it. The most forensically significant piece of visual evidence in this case almost did not survive. The FBI's 2-mile perimeter stopped half a mile short of the road the suspect most likely used to leave. Chioni's blue Honda CRV was impounded by the Pima County Sheriff's Department in the first days of February 2026. 6 weeks later, as of March 11th, it has still not been returned. It is sitting in a mechanic shop, still in law enforcement custody, still being reassembled after what investigative reporter Dave Mack described on Nancy Grace's Crime Stories podcast as an exhaustive search. The Pima County Sheriff's Department confirmed to Parade magazine that the vehicle remains part of the active investigation, but provided no timeline for its return. That is not a standard forensic processing timeline. In kidnapping investigations, vehicles belonging to individuals who have been publicly cleared are typically returned once forensic work is complete. 6 weeks is not routine. It suggests either the analysis has uncovered something extraordinarily complex, or the question investigators are trying to answer about what is inside that car has not yet been fully resolved. Chioni drove Nancy home in that vehicle on the night of January 31st. It was the last car she was confirmed to have been inside. If that same vehicle appeared on Camino Royale 8 minutes after her pacemaker disconnected, that single confirmation doesn't just answer the title question. It collapses the entire central mystery of this investigation in one moment. But there is a second vehicle in this picture that has received far less attention than it deserves. Retired NYPD Detective Pat Broen examined the Ring camera footage captured by the Strategullis family on Camino Royale at 2:36 a.m. on February 1st. His analysis was methodical and precise. The vehicle's slanted roofline, the shape of the rear windows, the quarter glass profile, the vertical orientation of the brake lights. His conclusion: the car appeared to be a Kia Soul, a compact crossover, not a blue Honda CRV. Common, quiet, forgettable. The kind of vehicle that disappears into any residential neighborhood at 2:30 in the morning without registering a second glance from anyone. If Broen's identification is accurate, it introduces a framework that changes how the entire night is read. Not one vehicle. 2. The Honda that transported Nancy home earlier in the evening, and a Kia Soul that moved through Camino Royale 8 minutes after her pacemaker went dark. 2 vehicles, potentially 2 roles, 1 night. 1 question: are they connected to the same people? The road itself adds another layer of significance to that question. Camino Royale is not a route that appears on standard GPS navigation when you are trying to move between the Catalina foothills and the broader Tucson road network. Standard mapping software routes drivers towards Skyline Drive or Sunrise Drive. Wider, better lit, equipped with traffic infrastructure. Camino Royale is the kind of road you know because you have driven it before, because it runs through the neighborhood where you live, because you have used it enough times that it becomes the automatic choice when you need to move quietly and quickly without crossing a single camera-equipped intersection. Tomaso Chioni has lived in this part of Tucson since 2006. His school sits along the northern corridor of the same foothills. He drives these roads every day: Skyline, East River, the back roads threading between Oro Valley and the street where Nancy lived on North Camino Escalante. These are not roads he would need to look up. They are the geography of his daily life. Danielle Strategullis told Fox News Digital directly. If someone even somewhat knew the area or had done any prior casing, the road behind Camino Royale, called Camino Escaya, would be an even more effective route. She described it as a road where you never see another person and never see a patrol car. That assessment came from someone who lives there and understands the street's invisibility from lived experience. The person who chose Camino Royale that night had the same understanding. Not from a map, from familiarity. The blue Honda is still in custody. The Kia Soul has been identified on the exit route. Chioni knew these roads. Evans lived inside the same geographic world. 2 vehicles, 2 men, 1 night. An 8-minute window that the forensic record has not yet fully explained to the public. The FBI drew a 2-mile circle around Nancy Guthrie's home and called it a canvas. Tens of thousands of personnel hours. Satellite imaging. Facial recognition infrastructure. Cellular analysis teams. The computational capacity to process 10,000 hours of surveillance footage simultaneously. And the perimeter stopped at 2 miles. The Strategullis camera sits at 2.5. That half-mile gap is not a minor administrative detail. It is the distance between the most forensically significant piece of visual evidence in this case entering the investigative record within 48 hours, and that same evidence surfacing weeks later because a private couple decided to come forward on their own. The FBI deployed helicopters fitted with Bluetooth scanning equipment, flying low-grid patterns over the Catalina foothills in search of Nancy's pacemaker signal. Those helicopter grids covered ground beyond the 2-mile canvas. The aerial search reached further than the ground teams. The technology extended past the evidence that had already surfaced publicly. The Camino Royale footage appeared in the gap between them. Pima County Sheriff's Department confirmed on February 27, 26 days into the investigation, that investigators were now reviewing vehicles in areas further from Nancy's home. For weeks before anyone officially acknowledged the perimeter needed to be wider. What changed? The footage went public. External pressure from the Strategulus story spreading across social media forced an expansion that should have been part of the initial plan. Fox News Digital approached 5 homes with street-facing cameras on Camino Royale. None had been contacted by investigators. One neighbor, Aldine Meister, told Fox News she had noticed an unidentified man walking near a junction that leads toward Nancy's street in mid-January, weeks before the disappearance. He was not dressed for exercise. He had his hat pulled low over his eyes. He did not move like someone out for a walk. She mentioned it to her husband, but did not report it until after the case became public. A separate neighbor reported seeing an unidentified male near what appeared to be an abandoned dark red Honda SUV on February 2nd, the morning after Nancy disappeared, parked at the intersection of Camino Juan Pisano and Pedrosica. That intersection sits directly between Camino Royale and Nancy's home on North Camino Escalante. The Honda stayed in that location for approximately 3 days before being moved. 2 separate individuals. 2 separate sightings. The same corridor. Weeks of pre-disappearance activity on the roads connecting the search perimeter's edge to Nancy's front door. The search stopped half a mile short. The evidence did not. The FBI reviewed the Strategulus footage. 12 vehicles captured between midnight and 6 a.m. on February 1st, 2026. A federal investigation. A forensic timeline that places a vehicle on that exact road during that exact window. And the conclusion that came back through a source connected to the investigation, reported by TMZ on February 27th, was 2 words: dead end. But the reasoning behind that conclusion was far more precise than the headline suggested. The FBI's stated position was specific. The area where the cars were driving, along with the ingress and egress patterns, led investigators to determine those vehicles had no association with the disappearance. Read that carefully. To conclude that movement patterns rule out 12 separate vehicles, investigators need a reference point. A picture of the suspect vehicle's route detailed enough to compare against 12 others and say with confidence, none of these match. That kind of conclusion does not emerge from an investigation running blind. It comes from one that already has a working model of how the suspect's car moved that night. And if that model exists, it was built from footage retrieved separately from somewhere inside the 10,000 hours of surveillance material investigators have been processing since the first week of February. That brings the vehicle question directly back to the Honda CRV and the Kia Soul. If the FBI's working model of the suspect's route already exists and was used to eliminate 12 vehicles on Camino Royale, then those 12 were ruled out because they do not match a vehicle investigators have already identified through a different source. The Kia Soul that Pat Broen flagged from that same footage was not among the 12 dismissed. It was the car the footage was there to find. Now set that against Chioni's blue Honda CRV still sitting in a mechanic shop 6 weeks later. 2 vehicles. One identified by a retired NYPD detective as consistent with the suspect's exit route. One still in forensic custody after an exhaustive search, connected to the last confirmed person with Nancy, in the same geographic corridor on the same night. ABC News added another layer. Sources told the network that investigators had gathered glimpses of vehicles from various cameras, but had not yet associated a specific vehicle with the disappearance. That sentence is built deliberately. It does not say there are no vehicle leads. It says no confirmed association has been made yet. The word yet is carrying a significant amount of investigative weight in that construction. The second vehicle sighting deepens this further. The dark red Honda SUV spotted near the intersection of Camino Juan Pisano and Pedrosica on February 2nd, 1 day after Nancy disappeared, remained in place for approximately 3 days. The man observed near it was described as Hispanic, approximately 5'9", a close-trimmed beard, a silver bracelet, a cigarette. The Pima County Sheriff's Department did not respond to Fox News Digital's multiple requests for comment on that sighting. A vehicle parked on the corridor between the crime scene and the ring camera, sitting there for 3 days. No official response. Whether it connects to the Kia Soul on Camino Royale, to the Honda CRV still in forensic custody, or to neither, its presence on that specific road on that specific morning is not background noise. It is the geography of this case drawing the same circle around the same roads, around the same names, again. The 12-car dismissal did not close the vehicle question. It narrowed it. And the vehicle that remained standing after 12 were eliminated is the one that matters. If you're still here, subscribe, because cases like this only work when people stay. And tell us where you're watching from. I love seeing my global family represent. Drop your country or city in the comments. The suspect who approached Nancy Guthrie's front door on the night of February 1st, 2026, did not bring a cell phone. That operational conclusion was reached independently by former FBI agent and CIA officer Tracy Walder, digital forensics expert Heather Barnhart, and retired FBI supervisory special agent Jason Pack. And it matters not simply as a forensic footnote, but as a direct window into the depth of planning behind this operation and who possessed the knowledge required to execute it. Every phone is a continuous broadcasting device. It pings cell towers. It logs onto Wi-Fi networks in range without the owner doing anything deliberate. It records movement in real time and stores it in a form that federal investigators can access with a single subpoena. Carrying a phone into a residential neighborhood at 2 in the morning places that device, and the person it is registered to, on a timestamped map that can be reconstructed days, weeks, even months later. The suspect understood this entirely. The phone was left behind or disabled before the approach. That decision was made in advance. Pima County Sheriff Chris Nanos confirmed that digital forensic teams are actively reviewing cell tower data to identify anomalous devices, phones that do not belong to the neighborhood, during the window Nancy was taken. Investigators can establish what experts call a pattern of life for a neighborhood: the devices that belong there, the devices that do not, the devices that were deliberately absent during a precise and specific window of time. Apply that framework directly to Tomaso Chioni and Dominic Evans. Both men live within the geographic radius of the cell towers covering the Catalina foothills. Both of their phones would typically produce continuous tower data throughout any given night. If either phone went dark between midnight and 4 a.m. on February 1st and reactivated after dawn, that absence already exists in the tower data the FBI collected in the first week of the investigation. It cannot be deleted after the fact. It cannot be explained away retroactively. It sits in a federal database with a timestamp, and it is there whether or not the person who created that gap ever intended for anyone to look. And the relevant dates do not begin on February 1st. Law enforcement sources confirmed that January 11th and January 23rd are dates of investigative interest, dates when suspicious activity may have occurred near Nancy's property. The neighbor who came forward, Aldine Meister, described an unidentified man in mid-January walking near the junction that leads toward Nancy Street. A second neighbor described a separate suspicious presence in the same corridor around the same period. If any phone connected to this case went dark on those same mid-January dates, in the same late-night, early-morning window, across 3 separate nights, that pattern is not coincidence. It is a behavioral signature that repeats with the regularity of rehearsal. Digital forensics expert Heather Barnhart raised a layer that extends the digital picture beyond phones entirely. A device does not need to actively connect to a Wi-Fi network to leave a trace near it. Simply being within signal range of a router causes the device to register as a detected presence in that router's access log. Nancy's home router and the routers of neighboring properties may contain records of unrecognized devices that appeared within range on January 11th, January 23rd, and February 1st. The FBI recovered residual backend data from Google's servers tied to Nancy's Nest camera. Router access logs from the same address would have been equally within reach of the same investigators. The damaged utility box discovered around the corner from Nancy's home adds a further dimension. Investigators confirmed it is under active review as a possible connection to the neighborhood internet disruption reported on the night she disappeared. Multiple neighbors told News Nation that their home security camera footage from that night is either missing entirely or shows a gap marked as not available. A utility disruption that takes out neighborhood Wi-Fi at 1:47 a.m., the exact moment Nancy's Nest camera went offline, does not happen as a coincidence alongside everything else occurring in that corridor at that hour. Someone understood the digital infrastructure of that specific neighborhood. Someone knew which systems needed to go dark and how to make them go dark before the approach began. That level of operational knowledge does not come from a quick online search or a satellite map. It comes from time spent in that environment, from knowing that street, those cameras, and the technology running behind them from direct and repeated experience. Tomaso Chioni spent nearly 20 years living and working inside that corridor. The digital blackout on February 1st was designed to erase a trail. It may have created one instead. After the FBI released its images from Nancy's doorbell camera, the public's attention landed immediately on the obvious: the mask, the gloves, the black Ozark Trail backpack, the holstered firearm, the deliberate and unhurried movement of someone who had rehearsed this until urgency had been replaced entirely by procedure. But one detail protruding from the suspect's front right jacket pocket went largely unexamined until former FBI agent and CIA officer Tracy Walder studied the footage frame by frame on the Brian Anton Investigates podcast on February 28. An antenna, visible when reviewed carefully. An object Walder could not confirm definitively, but one she assessed with the precision of someone who has spent an entire career reading operational details and field intelligence. She leaned toward one explanation above all others. A walkie-talkie. Her reasoning was direct and specific. A walkie-talkie makes sense when a getaway vehicle is a critical component of the operation. If someone else assisted, that device would allow for short-range communication, a signal to move the car to a designated location at a designated time, without leaving a single traceable record in the cellular data the FBI had been processing since day one. Read that alongside what the forensic timeline already shows. At 2:28 a.m., the pacemaker signal drops. 8 minutes later, a vehicle appears on Camino Royale traveling away from the neighborhood. That timeline is consistent with a driver who was not passing through randomly. A driver who was staged nearby, waiting, and received a signal to move. The only communication method that achieves that level of coordination without appearing in tower data, without generating a call log, without leaving any digital record whatsoever, is a radio frequency device that geofencing technology cannot detect. Former FBI agent Jennifer Coffendafer was more direct than Walder on this point. She stated publicly, "The person at the door definitely had an accomplice, and possibly more than one. There is no way you commit this without at least one other person involved." She pointed directly to the antenna. She went further. At least 2 people are involved. That assessment eliminates the possibility of a lone actor entirely and reframes the entire operation. Now connect that 2-person framework directly to the title question. Chioni drove Nancy home on the evening of January 31st. He knew the layout of her property. He knew her routines. He knew her camera system. He knew the roads between her home and the rest of the neighborhood with the intimacy of someone who has driven them thousands of times. Dominic Evans, his bandmate of nearly 20 years in the Tucson-based rock band Early Black, had a physical profile that the internet matched to the doorbell footage within hours of it being made public. 2 people, both with some degree of access to the world Nancy Guthrie occupied. Both connected to each other through 2 decades of shared geography and a band formed together in 2007. The walkie-talkie theory does not require both of them to have been on that porch. It requires one person at the door and one person behind a wheel, coordinated, dressed similarly, operating on a frequency that produces no digital trace. Coffendafer raised that possibility explicitly. She noted that individuals involved in coordinated operations frequently choose to dress alike, and that the person without a gun and without a backpack should not automatically be assumed to be innocent. Retired police detective and Colorado Attorney General's Office Executive Lisa Miller reinforced the walkie-talkie conclusion from a separate angle. The doorbell footage does not show any of the glitching or distortion associated with a Wi-Fi signal jammer. She noted that even police car laptops show interference during traffic stops involving jamming devices. The clean video quality rules out a jammer being used during the approach, which puts the antenna firmly back in the walkie-talkie category. A device with a single purpose, coordinating a second person at distance, getting a car to a specific location at a specific time. At 2:36 a.m., a vehicle was on Camino Royale. 8 minutes after the pacemaker went silent. The math tells us someone was waiting. The antenna tells us someone was listening. On the night of January 31st, 2026, Tomaso Chioni drove his mother-in-law home from a family dinner. He walked her to her door. He confirmed she was safely inside. He drove away. Hours later, Nancy was gone. That sequence placed Chioni's name at the center of this investigation from the moment it became public, not because of anything investigators stated publicly, but because of the simple forensic logic that in any investigation, the last confirmed contact with a missing person is the first person examined. Chioni was that person. Tension mounted when former NewsNation anchor Ashley Banfield reported on February 4th that a highly regarded law enforcement source had told her Chioni might be the prime suspect in the case. The public response was immediate and intense. Sheriff Chris Nanos pushed back from the beginning, stating clearly that investigators had not identified a suspect or person of interest. But the scrutiny continued. The questions accumulated. And investigators did what the evidence required. They searched Chioni and Annie's home in a multi-hour operation that included luminol testing, the chemical compound used to detect biological material not visible to the naked eye. The blue Honda CRV was impounded. Chioni was interviewed. And then, on February 16th, Sheriff Nanos issued a formal statement. The Guthrie family, including all siblings and spouses, had been cleared as possible suspects. The family had been cooperative and gracious, and were victims in this case. Cleared. Officially. Publicly. And yet the Honda CRV connected to Chioni and Annie remains in law enforcement custody as of March 11th. Still at a mechanic shop, still being reassembled after an exhaustive forensic search, with no timeline provided for its return. That tension between a formal public clearance and a vehicle still sitting in forensic custody is not a contradiction. Investigators have clarified that being cleared as a suspect does not necessarily mean being cleared of all evidentiary relevance. The Honda was the last vehicle Nancy Guthrie was confirmed to have been inside. It transported her from the last safe environment she occupied to the front door of the home she never left. If that car carries trace evidence connecting it to the events of February 1st, biological material, fiber evidence, any forensic indicator, then its continued presence in custody means the analysis is not yet complete. Nanos addressed the ongoing public speculation about Chioni in a separate interview with the Daily Mail, acknowledging Chioni as the last known person to see Nancy alive, while urging the public not to mark someone who could be completely innocent. He was right. Last contact is not evidence of guilt. It is the starting point of an investigation, not its conclusion. On March 1st, Savannah Guthrie returned to the Today Show for the first time since her mother disappeared. She was joined at a memorial outside Nancy's home by her sister Annie and Tomaso Chioni. The three were photographed together at the growing tribute near Nancy's mailbox. A family united publicly by grief. A vehicle still in a mechanic shop. A case with no named suspect. And no one has yet explained why an exhaustive forensic examination of a cleared man's car has taken 6 weeks and is still not finished. Within hours of the FBI releasing the doorbell camera footage on February 10, 2026, the internet had produced a name. Not from investigators, not from law enforcement, from online communities who analyzed the suspect's height, build, movement, and the visible portion of his face and landed on a single individual, Dominic Evans. 48 years old, 5th grade elementary school teacher, father of 3 sons, drummer in the Tucson-based rock band Early Black. Tomaso Chioni's bandmate of nearly 2 decades. What followed was not an investigation. It was a wave. People gathered outside Evans's home in the Tucson suburb of Marana. Evans and his wife Andrea spent the night with the lights off, watching through their windows as people accumulated on the street outside. Their teenage son was told not to come home. Andrea Evans later told the New York Times she had been scared and numb, watching through the window all night, trying not to let any light out. Evans spoke to the Times directly. He said it felt like someone had taken his name from him. When asked why he thought it happened, he was measured in his response. Monetary clickbait, a drive for relevance and engagement, with innocent people absorbing the damage in the process. He confirmed he was at home with his family on the night Nancy Guthrie disappeared. He confirmed he had spoken with investigators from both the FBI and the Pima County Sheriff's Department for approximately 40 minutes. Questions about the band, his relationship with Chioni, and his whereabouts on the night of January 31st into February 1st. He had not heard from investigators since. Sheriff Nanos addressed Evans directly in a public interview, calling what he was enduring horrible and urging him to pursue legal action against those spreading unverified accusations. That language, public sympathy from the lead investigative agency, is not the language used for someone actively under investigation. It is the language reserved for someone who has been caught in the crossfire of a high-profile case and whose suffering the investigation acknowledges as unjust. Evans's connection to the Guthrie family is specific and limited. He met Nancy Guthrie once, in 2011, at an Easter egg hunt she hosted at her home. He learned about her disappearance from Instagram. His link to this case runs entirely through his 19-year friendship and musical partnership with Tomaso Chioni, a man who has himself been publicly cleared. But the investigative record does contain one detail about Evans that exists outside the realm of online speculation. Investigators questioned him specifically about his whereabouts on the night of January 31st. They asked about his relationship with Chioni. They asked about the band. Those are targeted questions. They are not the questions you ask someone with zero relevance to a case. They are the questions you ask to establish a verifiable timeline and confirm or rule out a connection. Evans provided that timeline. He was home with his family. Investigators spoke to him once for 40 minutes and did not return. Whether that means he was quietly cleared through corroborating evidence, phone records, family confirmation, digital data, or whether the investigation simply moved to other threads without publicly closing the Evans question has not been stated. What exists? A physical resemblance powerful enough that trained analysts noticed it. A confirmed 40-minute interview with federal and county investigators. A public statement of sympathy from the sheriff. And a case that, as of March 13, 2026, still carries no named suspect. Dominic Evans says he was not involved. Law enforcement has not said otherwise. And the real suspect, masked, armed, and still unidentified, remains at large. Of every item the suspect carried to Nancy Guthrie's front door on the night of February 1st, one has proven to be the most forensically actionable piece of physical evidence in this entire investigation. Not the holstered firearm, not the gloves, the backpack, a black 25-liter Ozark Trail hiker pack. And according to Pima County Sheriff Chris Nanos, it is the single item of equipment investigators have been able to definitively identify from the footage. His statement to the Associated Press was precise. The backpack is exclusive to Walmart, and investigators are working with Walmart management to develop further leads. CBS News confirmed the exclusivity independently. The Ozark Trail hiker pack is not manufactured for third-party retailers. It is designed, distributed, and sold only through Walmart's retail infrastructure. That single fact transforms it from a generic piece of equipment into one of the most traceable physical items in this entire case. Every Walmart operates a surveillance architecture that most people underestimate significantly. Overhead cameras cover every aisle continuously. Register cameras capture transactions from multiple angles. Self-checkout stations have face-level cameras that record clear images of every customer at the point of purchase. Exterior parking lot cameras log every vehicle entering and exiting the property. And every transaction, cash or card, is timestamped and cataloged in a system that correlates directly to the camera footage recorded at that exact register at that exact moment. Walmart cooperated quickly. The company provided investigators with records of all Ozark Trail hiker pack purchases across recent months, both in-store and online. NBC correspondent Tom Winter confirmed that investigators subpoenaed Walmart for recent local Tucson area purchases. Sheriff Nanos called it one of the most promising leads in the investigation. A clean, direct, traceable thread. The kind that can collapse a case rapidly when followed without obstruction. Then the thread widened in a direction investigators had not publicly anticipated. Nanos told reporters that while the backpack is Walmart exclusive, the investigation had to consider the possibility it was not purchased directly from Walmart at all. His phrasing was careful. That backpack is new and exclusive to Walmart. But who's to say it wasn't bought and then resold on eBay? That is what investigators were looking at. The clean retail transaction trail extended suddenly into the secondary resale market. eBay, Facebook Marketplace, OfferUp, platforms where transactions are far harder to trace and faces are rarely captured on camera. Now connect the backpack directly to the title question. If the Ozark Trail was purchased in the Tucson area by someone connected to this case, someone with prior knowledge of Nancy's property, her routines, her camera system, that purchase is not an isolated transaction. It is one step in a deliberate sequence of preparation. The vehicle, the route, the digital blackout, the walkie-talkie, and now a backpack selected specifically, packed deliberately, and carried to the door of an 84-year-old woman who had no way of knowing that someone had been building toward this moment for weeks, possibly months. Former FBI agent Maureen O'Connell assessed the reward structure of the case and offered a framing that redefines the investigation's pressure points. If more than one person is involved, which she believes, they are now each sitting with the awareness that the other is thinking about that number. The Guthrie family has offered $1 million. The FBI added $100,000. Tucson Crime Stoppers contributed an additional amount, bringing the total past $1.2 million. In a coordinated operation where two participants each know the other is calculating, it is frequently not the forensic thread that breaks the case first. It is the psychological one. And the Ozark Trail has not gone cold. It has simply widened. Somewhere between a Walmart receipt and a resale platform record, the answer to who packed that bag and why is already sitting in a database waiting to be found. When FBI Director Kash Patel published the doorbell camera images on February 10, 2026, most people looked at the masked figure and saw one person on one night. But law enforcement sources immediately recognized something the public had not yet been told. Two of those images were not from the same date. ABC News reported it first. The image showing the masked suspect without a backpack or holstered firearm was captured by Nancy's Nest doorbell camera on a day prior to February 1st, not the morning she disappeared. Sources told ABC that the images showing the suspect fully equipped, backpack in place, holster visible, were from the morning of February 1st itself. Two separate appearances. Two separate dates. One person who had been to that porch before and came back. CNN confirmed it through a separate source. NBC confirmed it. CBS confirmed it. The reporting was specific and independently sourced across 4 competing newsrooms. CNN chief law enforcement and intelligence analyst John Miller stated directly that multiple trips to Nancy's front door fit with the investigative assumption that the operation was planned in advance and likely involved pre-operational surveillance and reconnaissance. The theory that crystallized among investigators and analysts was precise. The suspect approached Nancy's door on an earlier visit, noticed the camera, and was deterred, not permanently. Recalibrated. They returned on February 1st, equipped this time to neutralize it. A gloved hand over the lens. Branches pulled from the yard placed in front of it to obstruct the view. The first visit was reconnaissance. The second was execution. Former FBI agent Jason Pack told ABC News directly, "If it is the same person, it could indicate they were surveilling the location before the event occurred." The presence of preparation and planning elevates this from opportunistic crime to sophisticated, deliberate criminal activity. Now connect that directly to the title question. Who had the knowledge and the access to conduct pre-operational surveillance on Nancy Guthrie's home in the Catalina foothills without drawing any suspicion? Who could approach her front door on a residential street, in the middle of the day or in the middle of the night, without standing out to any neighbor? Someone whose presence in that neighborhood had a plausible, established explanation. Someone whose connection to that address already existed. The FBI asked neighbors to check their security systems for suspicious people or vehicles going back to January 1st, a full month before the disappearance. A month of potential surveillance activity. A month of visits that may have included Camino Royale, the back road that connects directly to the same daily route Chioni drives every time he travels between his school and his home. Pima County Sheriff Nanos responded to the 4-network confirmation on February 24th. He stated that there was no date or timestamp associated with those images and that any suggestion the photographs were taken on different days was purely speculative. For major networks. For independent law enforcement sources. One confirmed conclusion. The sheriff called it speculation. That contradiction is not confusion. It is control. Former FBI agent Jennifer Coffendafer was explicit about an additional possibility. The image without a backpack may not be the same suspect on a different day. It may be a second individual, an accomplice on a reconnaissance run, dressed identically to the operative who returned on February 1st to complete the operation. One person who knew the property from years of family connection. One person whose physical profile matched what the internet identified within hours of the footage being released. Two people, two roles, one address they both had reason to know. The DNA recovered from inside Nancy's home contains genetic material from at least two individuals that does not match Nancy or anyone in her immediate circle. Mixed, complex, two contributors. The investigation has returned no match through Cody's. But the sample exists. It is being processed. And when forensic genetic genealogy unlocks what the national database could not, the person who built this operation will have left behind something they cannot recall. For networks. For independent law enforcement sources. One confirmed conclusion. The suspect visited Nancy Guthrie's porch before February 1st. ABC reported it first. CNN confirmed it through a separate source. NBC confirmed it. CBS confirmed it. The reporting was not vague. It was specific and corroborated. The image without the backpack was from a prior visit. The suspect came back. The operation was rehearsed. And then Sheriff Nanos stood in front of cameras on February 24th and called it purely speculative. That contradiction sits at the center of something larger than a disagreement over timestamps. Because the fracture between what 4 networks confirmed and what the sheriff denied publicly is not the only fault line running through this investigation. There is a second fracture, deeper, running directly between the two agencies meant to be working this case together. Reports surfaced in February that friction had developed between FBI agents and the Pima County Sheriff's Department. The specific allegation, reported by multiple outlets and not denied by either agency, was that the Sheriff's Department had purportedly denied the FBI access to evidence collected from the scene. If that allegation is accurate, it means the two agencies running the most high-profile kidnapping investigation in recent American history were at some point not working from the same evidence table. Sheriff Nanos received additional criticism for attending an Arizona Wildcats NCAA basketball game while Nancy's family was filming a direct video appeal to her suspected captors, urging them to make contact. He has faced accusations of making conflicting public statements at different points in the investigation. A report published by the Arizona Republic alleged discrepancies in his publicly posted professional resume, including a claim that he resigned from the El Paso Police Department in 1982 to avoid termination following a pattern of disciplinary incidents. The Sheriff's Department confirmed 2 clerical errors in the resume, but did not address the substance of the underlying allegations. The United Cajun Navy, a volunteer search organization with an established record in missing persons cases, formally offered a full operational package to Nanos. They received no response. Search, another established volunteer search organization, was similarly turned away. Former FBI agent Coffendafer posted publicly questioning why the sheriff kept declining assistance from proven civilian search experts and offered one alternative interpretation. Perhaps law enforcement already knows the geographic focus of the investigation and does not want civilian activity disrupting an active operational area. That reframes the sheriff's decisions in a different light entirely. If investigators are declining search volunteers not because of disorganization, but because they already know where to look and do not want outside interference complicating what is being built, that is not mismanagement. That is case control. The same logic that might explain the 4-network denial. The same logic that might explain why the Honda CRV connected to Tomaso Chioni is still in a mechanic shop 6 weeks later with no public explanation. Tell the public less than you know. Let the suspects believe the investigation is wider and less focused than it actually is. Build the case in the silence between what is confirmed and what is denied. A dedicated task force formed in March 2026, 5 Pima County Sheriff's officers, and multiple FBI agents working the Guthrie case full-time. Tips to the FBI tip line have tapered from the volume seen in early February. CNN senior law enforcement analyst Josh Campbell noted directly that a reduction in tip volume can actually benefit an investigation at this stage. Fewer tips means investigators are working verified leads rather than sifting through noise. When resources consolidate around a case rather than continuing to expand outward, it is a sign that the investigative field has been narrowed to a manageable set of confirmed leads being worked systematically toward a specific outcome. 40 days. No arrest. No named suspect. No confirmed location for Nancy Guthrie. And yet the forensic architecture of this case, built piece by piece across every thread this investigation has followed, does not point towards something unsolvable. It points towards something solved that has not yet announced itself. Start with what the evidence has confirmed. A vehicle appeared on Camino Royale at 2:36 a.m., 8 minutes after Nancy's pacemaker disconnected, on the most logical exit route from the scene. Identified by a retired NYPD detective as consistent with a Kia Soul. The blue Honda CRV connected to Tomaso Chioni, the last confirmed person to see Nancy alive, remains in law enforcement custody after an exhaustive forensic search, 6 weeks in, with no timeline for return. DNA recovered from inside Nancy's home contains genetic material from at least 2 unidentified individuals, mixed, complex, being processed through forensic genetic genealogy after returning no match in Cody's. The suspect visited Nancy's porch on at least 2 separate occasions. For major networks confirmed it. The operation was planned across multiple visits, multiple weeks, multiple deliberate decisions. Someone selected the vehicle, the route, the backpack, the communication device, the timing. Someone else may have stood on that porch first, dressed identically, to test the environment and report back. The FBI confirmed the prior visit. The sheriff denied it publicly. That contradiction is almost certainly strategic. The reward now stands at over $1.2 million. $1 million from the Guthrie family, $100,000 from the FBI, additional funds from Tucson Crime Stoppers. In a coordinated 2-person operation, that number does something the forensic evidence alone cannot. It introduces doubt between the participants. It creates a private calculation each person runs independently, and it only takes one of them to decide the math works in their favor for the entire operation to begin unraveling from the inside. Was it the same car? The 8-minute window. The confirmed exit route. The vehicle identified on Camino Royale. The Honda is still sitting in a mechanic shop under law enforcement control. The evidence suggests the vehicle question is not open. It is answered, just not publicly. Was Tomaso Chioni involved? He was publicly cleared. His car is still in custody. He was the last confirmed person with Nancy. The roads between his daily life and her front door are the roads this investigation keeps returning to. Cleared does not mean resolved. It means the public portion of his examination is complete. Was Dominic Evans involved? He was interviewed for 40 minutes by federal and county investigators and has not heard from them since. Law enforcement has not named him. The case has not closed around him publicly. And the real suspect, masked, armed, unidentified, is still out there. Nancy Guthrie has not been found. She is 84 years old. She requires daily medication. Her family has not stopped. Savannah Guthrie returned to the Today Show on March 1st and has continued pressing publicly for her mother's return every single day since. The investigation is active. The task force is working. The forensic threads are being pulled. If you have any information at all about this case, anything, call 1-800-CALL-FBI or go to tips.fbi.gov right now. A detail that feels small to you may be the one piece that closes this. This case is far from over. And when it breaks, when an arrest is made, when the car is identified, when the DNA comes back with a name, when someone decides that $1.2 million is worth more than their silence, you need to be here. Subscribe to Cold Case History right now if you have not already. Hit the notification bell so you are the first to know the moment any new development drops. Drop your theory in the comments below. Tell us where you are watching from tonight. Tell us what you think the car was. Tell us which thread you think breaks first. The world is watching Nancy Guthrie's case, and that pressure is real, that attention has consequences, and it has moved investigations before. We will be here when this one moves. Do not miss it.